We all have that little voice inside ourselves. This little voice, it's hammering away at our confidence every day. Confidence is really going to come within yourself. It's not going to be something external. If you want it to be sustainable, growth always happens when you're the most terrified of doing something, you do it anyway. You do have to have a vision for the kind of life that you really want to lead, not the life that others are expecting you to lead. When you're wasting your time, you're basically wasting your life. So you want to get clear on what it is that you want.
Welcome to Inspired by Success, the podcast where I deep dive into the mindset of successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, and thought leaders. Get ready to be inspired and gain valuable insights to unlock your true potential. Do the hard things first. It's a simple strategy, yet often neglected. But for Scott Allan, it's been the driving force behind his mission to unlock human potential worldwide. From corporate trainer in Japan to best-selling author with over 500,000 books sold globally, Scott's journey spans over 10,000 hours of relentless research into confidence development and mindset mastery. His Pathways to Mastery series provides a roadmap for self-discovery, while titles like Empower Your Fear help readers with strategies for lasting change. With an entrepreneurial spirit, Scott has written over 30 books, and beyond writing, he uses real-world examples and actionable steps to inspire people to overcome fear, embrace challenges, and create their desired life. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Scott Allan.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Tell us about yourself, your journey, and what has made you the man you are today.
Sure. So, yes, my name is Scott Allan. I am an author. I've been publishing for about 12 years. And I think we have about 35 to 40 books out there, all in the area of self-help and personal growth. And how this started, I'll just give you a little bit of context on the background. So I do live in Japan, as we discussed before the show. I've been here for about 26 years now. And how I got here, and this is leading into eventually the writing and the path to personal growth. Before I came here, I'm from Canada originally. I had made a decision one day to just change everything. I think I wanted to change my work, change the way I was living, do something that was completely different. That's not only that I'd never done before, but that my friends had never done before, or anybody else for that matter. So as I was on this journey of, I think, personal growth and really just trying to find out what it is that I really wanted to do with my life. And I knew that it was writing was one of them. I just wasn't doing it at the time. One day I was in the bookstore and I found Tony Robbins' book, Awaken the Giant Within. And I thought, something just told me to buy the book. I did, took it home, went through it in a few days. And one of the chapters in his book is on how to set your goals. And I'd never done that before. So I thought, great, I'm going to do this. And in that chapter, it talks about creating a vision board, which I did. And so within a few days, I had my apartment was covered with like all these pictures of places I wanted to go, Sydney being one of those, and Vietnam and Thailand. And like these thoughts were coming to me and I couldn't stop them. It's like I was on this treadmill of I had to go traveling. It's just one of those things that was on my list next to writing books. So anyway, once I realized that was the thing, I couldn't let it go. And I spent a year planning my trip overseas. I wouldn't say that I planned it right to I didn't sit down and plan everything meticulously. We're like, I'm going to go here, 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 and do all these things. I just knew I wanted to go traveling the world, experience new cultures, and just see the things that, I've always dreamt of, instead of just sitting around bars talking about them, which is mostly what I was doing. So anyway, here's where things got interesting. After I made that decision to travel the world and do all these amazing things started showing up in my life that were pointing me more towards getting this thing, making this a reality. Give you an example. So a few months later, I picked up a newspaper. My roommate had brought it home. I've never read a newspaper in my life except for looking at, what's playing at the movies. So I opened up this newspaper just to a random page. And on that page was an advertisement for teaching English in Japan. I thought, well, that sounds like a great idea. Why don't I apply for this? Nothing to lose. So I sent them off a resume, spent like an hour or two putting together a nice little cover letter, really trying to sell myself that I wanted this position. Wasn't sure if I did or not. But anyway, they called me up a month later. Next thing I knew, I was in downtown Vancouver having dinner with a Japanese guy who owned a business language school here in Japan. And they were looking to hire people, they were going to hire 3 people. And they told me they had like hundreds of applications. So anyway, they called me up a week later and basically told me that I didn't have the job because I was number 4 and they were only taking 3 people. So I thought, okay, well, I'm still going forward with my plan. But the next day they called up and said, "Oh, the third guy dropped out, so you're in." So that was it,
Mm.
and that's how I ended
Goodness.
up here. Yeah, yeah. But what this all really related to was like I wanted to create a life of just not just a life of excellence. That was part of it. I didn't realize it at the time, but I wanted to experience life at a level that I wanted to create this big dream. And something just told me, whether it was intuition, which was I was really I really believe in the power of intuition. And once you make a decision for something, you really want it badly enough, everything that you need to make that outcome come true will start showing up for you. And that's exactly what happened. Right. So I did end up here after getting the job, came here, loved it. I knew I wasn't going back. I was making twice as much money, making lots of friends, learning a new language, eating lots of different foods. And I thought, this is like the dream I'd wanted. And yes, eventually ended up doing a lot of traveling, but this was always the home base for me. So, but anyway, just to speed things up a little bit, I started writing again, probably, I'd say about 15 years ago. I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but I was always a fiction writer. Loved coming up with stories, and my mind was just always very creative and imaginative. And that's probably why I nearly flunked out of school, is because I could never, keep my attention on the work. I was always coming up with ideas and stories and things like that. So when I got down to really got serious about writing, just sat down one day with a pen and paper and started penciling out a self-help book. I love self-help mostly because when I got into reading those kinds of books like Tony Robbins books and Brian Tracy, etc., Zig Ziglar, I was in a time of my life where I had to make a change to overcome a lot of addictions I was going through and just like other negative behaviors that were really holding me back. So when I started to grow from learning about all these strategies from these other books and, masters of the trade and people who are actually doing it, I realized, like, wouldn't it be interesting if I could write a book like that as well? And I've done a lot, did a lot of research, put in the work, put in the hours, and I probably ended up writing my first book. It took me a few years to write about 200,000 words, and eventually I did publish that. So I did start out with self-publishing, but traditionally, like, I was going through we were contacting traditional publishers and trying to get published. But once Amazon launched their self-publishing platform back in 2012, I was one of the first people to kind of jump in there and get things rolling. And nobody really knew what they were doing back in those days, right? There were no courses on it or anything like
Mm.
that. But I was just so passionate about having a book out there and then being able to teach people these strategies. And there's always imposter syndrome, the fear of people not liking the book and leaving negative comments. And I didn't really worry about any of that. I thought, I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens, because the goal was really just to publish a book and, not make $1 million or become famous or anything like that. It was just like, to get that goal was enough. But once it was out there, it kind of just led into something else, and I had more ideas, and I just continued to go with pattern of just creating more and wanting to have a larger global influence. So kind of a longer answer to your question, but I may have left out a few details. But for the most part, that was what brought us up to here, was just wanting to live a life of constant and continuous progress, really, and never stopping with that. Because I believe, like, once you stop working on yourself, everything else just kind of falls apart. Even your business, like, you can be great at your business, but if you're not working on yourself, your business is going to suffer as well. So
Mm.
I'm really big on focusing on my health, mentally and physically and spiritually, combining those three together. But yeah, we can dive into that a little bit more if you like.
Interesting. Let's talk about mindset and confidence. Can you share an experience where
Mm.
mindset transformation was crucial as well? And you mentioned you had addictions before. Tell us about, like, the pivotal moment when things needed to change and how your mindset shifted.
Yeah, mindset is really powerful. So there's different types of mindset as well. So I'll just try to keep it general, but I may focus on several other mindsets. So for me, anyway, just to start with, a mindset is your attitude towards something, right? And just going back a few years, I used to have the mindset that I had limitations, and those limitations were limiting beliefs, limiting thoughts, which really leads to, like, a limited outcome. And whenever you're believing in something that is, we'll call it a negative concept, that, I can't do this thing, or, I wasn't meant to do that, even though I really want to. That's for somebody else who's smarter than me. And there was just always these thoughts I had that were holding me back from doing the things I really wanted to do because I believed that I wasn't educated enough. I didn't have enough knowledge. I didn't have enough money. I didn't have enough opportunity. Basically, I didn't have enough of anything, right?
Mm.
And so the scarcity mindset, which I, even to this day, is something that I still struggle with, but it was one of those things that once I recognized that was the mindset that was holding me back from a lot of other things, I was able to hone in on that, laser target in on that mindset and start to attack it, basically like pull it apart. And whenever a negative thought would come up, I'd be able to recognize it, go, oh, there it is again, or if I had a negative, like a limiting belief, which we all have those, what holds most of us back is not recognizing when it's actually active and it's holding us back from something. So, to give you to make a point of this, if I set a goal for myself in my business and I want to say this year I want to make $1 million a year, but my limiting belief is that's not possible because I've never done it before. So I had to, switch that around and say, well, it is possible because, and then I'll grab role models and I'll, study how they did it. And I think that's a really, like, that's key right there. Is it doesn't matter if I've never done it before. I know it's been done before. And if I can find those people who have done it and are doing it, I'll read their books, I'll watch their podcasts or listen to their podcasts. I'll do everything I can to create the mindset that they have. And that's the thing I love about the mindset, is that you might have a mindset that's limiting you. But if you can find somebody who has got a mindset that's they're in a place where you want to be, you can just adapt their strategies and their way of thinking by, again, just listening to what they're saying, learning from their wisdom and everything like that. And over time, if you adapt that and bring it into your life, and I do this through meditation, through creative visualization, eventually your mindset is going to start to think like that person, right? So I've done this with Tom Bilyeu, who runs Impact Theory. He's one of my greatest mentors, and he just has a very solid mindset. And I knew this from the first moment I watched his show and interviewing people. Like, he's just focused. And I was like, that's what I want. So once you can identify the kind of mindset that you really want, then you can start to develop it, right? Because if you believe that, 50% of our brain is we can still adapt that and we can mold it into whatever we want to. That's a lot of real estate you have to play with, right? You can literally do anything, right? Mindset and confidence are linked, but I really believe that once your mindset is changed, you can't go back to the original version of what you were before. I think there's a saying that I just love. It's, like, once you have a new idea, you can't go back to that original idea you had before. Like, your mind just adapts to that new way of thinking. There are certain mindsets that we need to develop in order to achieve our goals. So, just to wrap it up with the scarcity mindset, that way of thinking, that was something that was always holding me back from achieving financial success and achieving, like, confidence as well, because I always believed that I wasn't enough. I'm not enough to do this. And so whenever I would be in the same room with people who were high level achievers or performers, I always felt like I was lower than they were because I didn't believe that I was as good as they were. Right. And again, that's a mindset that I realized that was just, they weren't projecting anything onto me. They weren't saying, you're not good enough to be here. My own thoughts were telling me that. And so you start to believe that, and then you start to pull back and just go back to the way things were. So if you want to move forward, you have to realize that you are in control of creating your own mind. You can take it to any level you want to, right? You just have to make a decision, where do you want to go with this? Like, what level do you want to achieve? And there's a certain level of imposter syndrome that comes with that too, because your imposter syndrome will say, well, that's not really you, and this is really uncomfortable, so let's not do that. Right? But that's the great thing about imposter syndrome, is that we think it's a bad thing, when in fact, I actually think it's a good thing. Because when I'm feeling imposter syndrome, let's just go back to when I was writing a book. I was like, well, I'm not really a writer. I'm not a very good writer. I shouldn't really be doing this. I'm not Stephen King. And my mind just came up with all these excuses. But I realized that the imposter syndrome was there because I was moving myself out of my comfort zone into a level of discomfort where I just felt a lot of fear, right? And then once you move past that, then you can move into a new level of confidence. Like confidence always comes with taking action, right? And it's with everything. That's why I wrote Do the Hard Things First. That was the first book in that series was based on overcoming procrastination because I've always struggled with chronic procrastination, which killed my confidence all the time. And so I realized that when I started taking action towards the things that I was putting off, my confidence just went up naturally. So taking action and confidence, they're really on the same level. And if you work on doing one hard thing every day, you're just going to become naturally confident. And again, it's the same thing as, when you don't do those things, you feel less confident. So confidence is not some like a muscle you just build up and it just, stays there forever. You do have to continue to work hard towards the things you really want to. So
Very interesting. And you mentioned the scarcity mindset and that belief. Do you know where that came from? Because in terms of books that I've been reading on self development, a lot of our beliefs come from our upbringing and the way our parents treated us as
mm,
well. And that just ingrains into our belief system. So, where did all these limiting beliefs come from for you?
great question. Yeah. So I think, first of all, a lot of it does come from our upbringing. That's true. Especially, I've spoken to people who grew up in extremely wealthy families and they were always surrounded by a lot of things and money, and they didn't seem to have that scarcity mindset thinking. Not everyone anyway. Some people did, but they just grew up in an environment, and I think this is the key, is like the environment that you're growing up in. And this isn't just life at home either. It's also the education system. It's life at school. Because, not to get into the conversation of, education and all that, but when you go to school, you're in an environment where, you're learning, I don't know if you call them skills, but you're learning something that's training you to get a job, basically, right? Which is fine. I mean, the world needs jobs and we need people in those jobs, right? But what I noticed, like my environment, I think when I was growing up, and this is the same for a lot of people, is that we get a lot of mixed messages. That's where a lot of our self doubts come from. The scarcity mindset, though, really comes from hearing the same messages over and over again. So, give you an example. We don't have enough money for that. We can't afford that. We're on a budget. Like, I remember, like, when I started tackling this thing, I realized like a lot of those messages that I listened to way back when I was growing up were still in my head. Like, they were still playing. And I didn't notice that they were playing in the background until I actually realized one day, like when I said, hey, I think like the scarcity mindset thing is like holding me back from achieving the success that I really want. And I'll define success in a little bit. But once I realized that, I started to notice these messages. Like, and when I did, I was able to say, nope, I'm not doing that anymore. And I would go into the grocery store, for example. Let's just use that as an example. And I would see if you've got apples, for example, one apple is $10 and one apple is $1. I would always take the cheapest apple, right? And this was a really important discovery for me, is that I started to notice that whenever I went shopping or looking for something, I would always get the cheapest thing. Right. And what this actually relates to is that when you do that, and look, I'm all for bargain shopping and everything like that. That's totally fine. But by buying the cheapest thing, it was so ingrained in me that I didn't even think about it. Even though I could afford the more expensive thing, I would always get the cheapest thing anyway. So what that actually was telling my mind is that, you're not worth having the more expensive item. You only get the cheapest item. And I did it for clothing. I did it whenever I bought a car, right? I would get like the cheapest car in the lot and it would fall apart in 6 months. So
Mm.
I started to change the way that, and I'm still working on this, by the way. It really is an ongoing process because it's so automatic, right? And this is something for anybody who's listening. Like, if you're struggling with the scarcity mindset, first of all, Killing Sacred Cows is one of the books that changed my life. If you want to look for a way to break your scarcity mindset, grab that
What's the
book.
book
I'm
called?
also
What's
I'm also Killing Sacred Cows.
okay?
Yeah.
Take a note.
And the author has another one called Disrupting Sacred Cows. But that book talks about the scarcity mindset and how to break it down. When I listened to that audiobook or grabbed the book, just it was a game changer, right? But anyway, but that was one of the things that he had mentioned in the book, is like always buying the cheapest thing. But here's the thing, is like buying something that's cheap is totally fine. The thing is, I wanted the more expensive item. And that was the difference, is that I wanted this, but I settled for this. right? So the scarcity mindset was saying, well, you're only worth the cheapest thing. So let's just keep going with that. And you can imagine how that makes you feel over time. You start to feel like you're not worthy of having anything that's worth of like any value, right? So that right there is a big game changer. I still struggle with it every day, but at least I can say like I'm in the game. I'm in the game to change this for the better, right? And I've
Mm.
actually started to create a book around it, but I'm not going to release it until I've done some more research. Right. But anyway, this all comes back to your level of confidence, your self doubt. There are different mindsets. Of course, Carol Dweck's book on mindset, it's a great book. Highly
Mm.
recommend that one as well.
Yeah.
For moving forward, I think like you need to attach your purpose or your mission to a goal that you want to achieve, right? And I won't get into like goal achievement and all that. There's a lot of material out there for that, but it just comes down to like knowing what you want, making a plan to get it, and then showing up every day and working on it, right? So it's knowing what you want. Let's just say if like for me, I want to create a global publishing business, and that was one of my goals. It still is, right? So it was a big goal. It's a big, scary goal. But once I decided that's what I wanted, I made a list of all the things I had to do to make it happen. And I realized that there were a lot of things on the list, but you can only do one thing at a time. And a lot of the things on the list, I don't have the skill sets for. So that meant, finding people and hiring people to come into the business and help me with that. So anyway, going off topic a little bit, but a big part of the building your mindset is just committing to some time every day, whether it's reading something, watching podcasts, and having that strategic mindset of working on something that's moving you towards your greater self. So I think that's the best way I can put it.
Very fascinating. In terms of confidence as well, you mentioned, how does one build that confidence, especially without needing external validation? Because, today's society, I know my son, for example, I wish I could help
Mm.
him with his confidence issue. And, that starts at a young age as well. So how does one build that, high level of confidence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's several ways, and without making it complicated. So one of the things that I do, I think mindfulness has a lot to play with this. So I spend 20 to 30 minutes a day. We'll call it meditating, but let me just break it down what that is. For me, meditation is really just sitting down with myself for 30 minutes, whether in the morning or the night. I actually do both. Right. So I'll spend an hour a day meditating, 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night. And what I do is I do a form of creative visualization, and this leads into confidence, by the way, because I start to visualize the life that I want to have, tomorrow, next week, next year. And you've got that. Now consider that practice. And then you've got the flip side of this is you are stuck in the past and you're visualizing all the things that happened to you, how helpless you were, and how you get into the victim mindset and everything like that. Now that will pull your confidence the other way, because now you're back to scarcity mindset thinking. You're back to uncertainty and self-doubt and everything like that. So you want to be very conscious of the fact that you have the past, the present, and the future. So when I do meditation, I'm focusing on, yes, I'm breathing in the present, but I'm focusing on that future vision. And this is important because you need to create, not just creating new thoughts, but you need to create that new language within yourself, because we all have that little voice inside ourselves. And this is actually where, this little voice is, it's hammering away at our confidence every day, because it's like that old tape recorder that we don't even see it. It's constantly playing, but we don't see it. It's buried down in our subconscious somewhere, and it's just playing constantly. So that's the thing, is when you get silent with yourself, you can hear it, and you can see it. And then once you recognize that it's there, you're able to develop work with the tools that can enable you to dismantle it, basically. So for me, when I see, we'll call it a negative thought or a negative belief, something that I used to believe in, like I'm not worthy, and suddenly, your little tape recorder is telling you this, but when you recognize it, giving you those messages, you can say, no, actually, that's not true. I am worthy. And this is how I know that. and you've got to create that evidence for yourself, right? So just getting back to the role models, like I think it's really important to identify people that, and this can be anybody. Like for me, it's like Tom Bilyeu, Tony Robbins, could be Mel Robbins. I think she's great. They talk very specifically about this and how confidence is just a matter of like having trust with yourself, trusting yourself to do the things that you say you're going to do, right? Because it's the outside world is not necessarily going to give you the confidence. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people is we look for that validation in other people. And it's okay to get people to give us some, acknowledgement, or, we can feel confident when someone compliments us on something. But that confidence is really going to come within yourself. It's not going to be something external. If you want it to be sustainable, the confidence is going to come from within you. But I'd recommend just, again, one strategy is just getting quiet for yourself. With whether you start with 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, but just taking that time out where you have no distractions, there's no TV or, internet, you're just alone with yourself for a short period of time, and get used to going into your own heart, going into your own mind. And it's a little bit scary, to be honest, but that's where the growth happens. Growth always happens when you're terrified of doing something, you do it anyway. I think as Susan Jeffers says, like feel the fear and do it anyway. I'm a total believer in that. So,
Wow, yeah. I
but
think the key message I hear there is also definitely becoming more self-aware and being aware of all these
mm,
thoughts that you're internally thinking. So that's something that we can start to do is meditating and becoming more self-aware of our thoughts. And in terms of hitting our
mm,
goals as well, if we have big goals, like I have big, massive goals as well, but one is writing a book, but I have been
mhm,
procrastination. So what are the root
mm.
causes of procrastination and how can we overcome that?
Right. So procrastination is a defense mechanism that we use to avoid doing hard things or anything really. And I still struggle with it to this day, every day. There are things I look around in my environment and, I'll find things that an application form that I should have filled out 3 months ago, for example. And I'll find it and I'll be like, yeah, well, there's always tomorrow, and then the procrastination cycle begins. So what it really comes down to is you may have a big goal, but big goals can be very overwhelming. Let's just say, like writing a book, for example. And I coach people every day on, writing tactics and things like that. So we always break everything down into smaller pieces, right? So I'll just use writing a book as an example, but you can use this for anything, right? Whether it's building a business, writing a book, getting married, for example, and you've got to plan the whole big wedding, whatever it is, you can take that goal, right, and break it down into, let's just say you have 100 steps and you've just taken take 30 minutes and you write down all the steps that you can think of, brainstorm everything, write it down, and then just choose one thing on that list. Now, this should be something that is measurable, because when you complete it, you're going to be able to say, I did it. You can check it off on your calendar. This could be something that might take you 5 minutes to do, right? But this is where momentum begins. And this is why a lot of people don't actually start anything. So I'm going to go back to the application form that I found. I hate filling out application forms. I'll avoid them at any cost, right? But what I realized is that all I had to do was just one thing on that form every day. So today I'm going to fill out my name. Tomorrow I'll fill out box one, box two, and then I'll just continue to do a small step towards that. And before I know it, the form was done. It was in the mail. And again, it sounds like a very simple thing, like something that's really silly, but impact of not doing that thing, that can really harm you in the, like, in the long run. So something that happened to me, just a quick story. Several years back, maybe 5 or 6 years back, I had a credit card bill that I always paid my credit card bills. They always came out of my bank account. So that was easy, because the money just comes out and we don't have to think about it. But this one card in particular, I had to actually drive across town to the bank to pay it because it wasn't linked to my bank account. They'd sent me reminders and I kept avoiding the reminders. Again, procrastination was like, I really don't want to do it today. I'll do it tomorrow. And then it was next week. And then it was next month. And they kept sending me reminders that I kept throwing in the garbage or just putting somewhere, so that and I always put it out of sight. Right. And that's the thing with procrastination is whatever it is that you're procrastinating on, chances are you're pushing it into a corner, into a closet or somewhere so you don't have to see it. And eventually, 3 months later, I had my credit was canceled, everything, all my cars and everything, right? And I realized like all I had to do was pay this. The bill was like $300. It wasn't even a big bill, but I just kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off until eventually something really bad happened. And now that's one example. I know other people have had much worse things happen because they were procrastinating on things. But I realized like if I had just broken down that simple process, driving across town to the bank was the issue, and I didn't want to do that. Maybe all I had to do was just pick up my car keys first, go sit in the car, make sure I have the bill. Like it was just such a simple thing that could have been done in a couple of hours. But you can apply this to anything, like taking that simple step approach. I think James Clear talks about the 2 minute rule in his book. I call it the 5 minute. I think it was like it doesn't matter if it's 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but choose one thing you can work on and you can just get it done. Like all of these little things are going to add up to your big goal, right? And then once you get to that goal, nothing, that's going to boost your confidence, first of all. But the most important thing is you're going to prove to yourself that all of this procrastination and the difficulty and everything that you were telling yourself, like it was all in your head, right? And that you can do this, right? And then what you do is you rinse and repeat. Now you take another goal. Maybe this one's even bigger, but you just apply the same approach to that. Just make brainstorm all the little goals you can start to hack away at every day. Do 1, 2, or 3 a day. Just start to work on that. And that's really the process. And by the way, just like time blocking in, if you have to block in 30 minutes for it, just block in 30 minutes on your calendar, write it down, put it on a sticky note, whatever it takes. And this, I still do this, by the way, I'll write it down on a sticky note. I'm doing this today at this time, and I'll have it in my Google Calendar, because the most important thing to do, again, is to show up for yourself and just do it. Right. So there are many, many, many things that I did not do because I wasn't showing up for myself. And the result of this was, sure, lack of confidence, lack of trust in myself to get it done. And then I started to blame the external world for all the reasons why I couldn't do it. Right. Yeah. When in
I
the
like that.
end, it's really like it's all on us. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There was this phrase that I heard, and then it changed me. And that phrase was, everything is your fault. So what are you going to do about it? Basically, if you think
Mm-hmm.
everything is your fault, then you're going to take responsibility and be accountable
Mm-hmm.
in life too. And it makes you take different actions and find different solutions for everything that's going wrong in your life, or everything that's going right. As long as you have
Mm-hmm.
that mindset that everything is your fault, then you'll take a lot of action. So yeah, what advice do you have for people seeking to discover their true life purpose or their passion? Because you've created the vision board, you've living the dream. Now you've set out to do what you've done. You've written books. You're living in Japan. You've achieved a fair bit in that you should be proud of. So, what advice do you have for others seeking to discover their true passion and their life purpose?
Yeah, that's a great one because I work with people all the time with this. So probably the obstacle that a lot of people struggle with is a lack of clarity. Like they don't know what they want because they've never taken the time to really work it out or discover what that is. Or they do know what they want and they don't believe that they're actually worthy of getting it. But either way, what you need to do is, and this worked really well for me and it still does to this day. By the way, I still have a vision board in my office where I didn't have one for the longest time. And when I don't have something to look at visually, I start to lose track of what it is that I'm working on, like my focus. So having a vision board is something that you definitely want to start putting together, because to be honest, that's probably the one thing that got me to this place here, was just having a vision. And I think whether you have a vision board on your wall or it's in your mind and you have vision there, it doesn't matter, but you do have to have a vision for the kind of life that you really want to lead, not the life that others are expecting you to lead. And that's where a lot of people struggle, is because we're trying to live up to someone else's expectations, right? Whether it's our parents, our friends, our employers, we're waiting for others to tell us that it's okay to do this thing. And I got to the point where I realized that Nobody was going to give the dream to me. I had to actually take action towards it and take it. So I'll just break it down into very specific action steps that you can take. First of all, journaling. So I always have these journals. New one, by the way, nothing in it yet, right? But I have a bunch
Mm.
of other journals where just like they have tons of notes in them. And I'll spend 10 or 15 minutes every morning just doing 2 or 3 pages, which like they're the morning pages. And those are just a great way to, first of all, start your day. But the reason you want to do this is because you need clarity on what it is that you really want. And you're not going to get clarity right away. Because I work with a lot of people who, like, I don't really know what I want. So when that's the case, we just end up going through life by default, reacting to the things that are in front of us, which is basically like you put a shiny object in front of somebody who doesn't have clarity on what they want, and they'll always go for that shiny object. Right. And I've done that many times myself. And then you just end up wasting time, wasting money. And when you're wasting your time, you're basically wasting your life. So you want to get clear on what it is that you want. Even if you don't have to be like 100% certain that this is it, but you have to feel like you're moving in the right direction. And for me, like coming up like the vision board, I picked up a book in a bookstore and I started to write down my goals. And when I did, I was surprised to see what I'd written down because up to that point, I'd never really thought about having these things before. But when I started writing them down, it's like, wow, this I didn't don't know where that came from, but I want more of it, and I just kept going with it. I started creating the vision of what it would be like to live in a foreign country. So what I would do is I would get pictures of Thailand and Vietnam and like all these places that I wanted to go to, the Sydney Opera House, whatever it was, right? So the thing is, when you look at these things and you can visualize yourself in the future doing these things, that's going to make the dream happen. It really
Mm.
is. That's the same with my publishing business and writing books, is that before I published my first book, I created my own cover, even before, we have all these fancy tools now and graphics and everything and AI that we can use. But even before that, I would just be penciling these things out and putting everything up on my wall because I had to see in my environment, I had to create that environment for that dream. I had to make it real before it was real, if that makes sense. All right. So that's the thing is that you just have to put in the time where you're actually writing things down, making it clear. If you're not clear in the beginning, just keep doing it. Just make it a daily habit of showing up for yourself, writing down what your goals are. And if you're not sure what they are, just start writing down the things that you feel most passionate for, like the one thing that you've always wanted to do and you're not doing it. Something's holding you back. And chances are what's holding you back, it may be some external things, like maybe you're in an environment with people that are not supporting your goal and everything like that, but that's not an excuse, right? Because again, the external world, we can't control that, but you can control the internal world that you have, right? Once you realize that, you can create anything that you want to, but just get very clear on what it is that you want. Make a plan or block in the time to show up every day to work on it. And that is the key. Because a lot of things is what happens is, everybody gets busy and we all know like, yeah, I want to do this thing, but I don't really have the time right now. So I'm going to wait for 5 years, when I'm retired. I'm going to wait until there's always something, I'll do it after this happens. But that time comes and then it's like, well, now I've got something else to do. I mean, life never slows down. There's never a perfect time to start anything. You have to make that time. That's it. You have to make the time for it and you have to show up to do it. And then you're going to start to build the momentum. And once you get the momentum, my momentum eventually led to, I'll call it an obsession, but it was just an obsession to continue pushing forward.
Mm.
And that's a really good feeling to have. Like if you can get that going, then you develop the mindset of like, for me, my mindset is like whatever it takes. And I know that if I really want something badly enough, I'll do whatever it takes to get it. And I think that's a mindset that you want to work really hard to adapt. Because if you can adapt that, then nothing is going to be able to stand in your way. You'll do whatever it takes to get it. So
Yeah, belief and mindset. It's so crucial. And I know that writing things down and visualizing helps because me personally, when I write my goals down, it's like you're putting it out into the universe and then I'm visualizing it every night and every morning as well. But it's like a piece of, like a puzzle, so you've got to figure out the pieces to make it happen,
Mm.
and you've got
Hmm.
to want it really badly too, like you said, no matter what, just you got to want it. But I want a couple of different things, and I guess focusing on the main thing is crucial first, and then achieving that goal, and then focusing on the next. So I wanted to ask you, who has been your biggest inspiration, like in terms of, you mentioned Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, who else have been your biggest inspirations and mentors, and what books have made a massive impact on
Mm.
you?
Yeah, I think I really love the work of Jay Shetty. He wrote the book Think Like a Monk, right? And he
Yeah.
has the podcast On Purpose. And he's just a very charismatic, he's full of wisdom, and he just has a very calm presence. Whenever I watch his podcasts, one of my goals is to be on his podcast one day, right? But he just has that very calm presence about him, and I like that. Now, Tom Bilyeu, of course, Jay Shetty, and then there's Joe Dispenza. Joe
Mm.
Dispenza, I intend to go to one of his live events, hopefully this year. But when I got into his work just like a couple years ago, he introduced me to the whole concept of like, stop living in the past. Everything you want is in the future. And I've read his books and I've watched most of his interviews. And what I love about it is like everything you want is inside of you. And he has a very incredible story as well, where I think he was in a really bad car accident. He basically told the doctors that he's not going to take their treatment. He's going to go home and heal himself, which he did. And he just has some incredible stories of people that have healed themselves through his work, right? So, but he introduced me to the concept of neuroscience, and I started studying more of that. And there's just so much wisdom there. And also, he gives you very specific strategies on meditation and why we should do it. So there's a lot of people that I've been following over the years. Mel Robbins, again, I mean, I just love the way that she just comes right at you with, she doesn't hold anything back. She just tells you the way it is. And I really like that, because she really cares about people. And you can tell, like with all these people, like you can always tell that they just love people. They love helping people to achieve their dreams and their goals. I think when you have to choose the top 5 people that you spend your time with is who you become. I mean, I truly believe that. Now, you may not be with them physically, but if you're learning from the way that they're living their lives, you are spending time with them, like, I think so.
Yeah,
But
that's powerful.
yeah, I'd highly recommend like just finding what your circle is, like who is in your circle. Start to make it a point of learning everything you can from them, because ultimately, if you do this enough, the days, the weeks, the months, the years are going to go by. If you invest your time in this every day, there's no telling what you can achieve within a year. I think, like again, just to mention Tony Robbins again, I don't know if it's Tony or if it's Jim Rohn who said this, but it's like you overestimate what you can achieve in a day or a week, but you underestimate what you can achieve in a year. I truly believe that. So,
Beautiful.
mm.
Thank you for that. It's been very enlightening. For those of you who want to find you and follow you, where can they find you?
Sure, they can find me. Of course, the books are on Amazon, where mostly everything else is. You can just Google Scott Allan Books. If you go to scottallanbooks.com, you'll find our Shopify store. We're just about ready to launch it, but it is live, and scottallanpublishing.com. So those 2 URLs there, and probably a quick Google search. You can probably find a lot of the books there. Do the Hard Things First, Fail Big, Relaunch Your Life. Those were some of the books that you'll probably find on the website. But it depends on what you want to learn. So do you want to learn something on gratitude, or how to focus, or I have books on those topics specifically. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been a great interview, and I appreciated you inviting me on here today.